Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming to see my talk. We'll be talking about Redux. Let me introduce myself. My name is Giovanna Monti. I'm a software developer at Adeline. We are a French company. We're based in Paris, and we deal with search technologies. We're search experts. We do some consulting, some training, and we develop our own set of products like A2 and all that site. Okay, let's get into it. First question, how many of you are familiar with Redux? Please raise your hand. Great, many of you. Now keep your hand up if you kind of think it sucks. No one? Someone? Yes, don't be afraid. I mean, I can totally relate to some of you who raise your hands because Redux can be a mess. You know, you have so many concepts and so much boilerplate code. You have actions, you have reducers. Then you have to connect your components to get it working. And then you have to write some legacy, ugly methods like map state to props, map dispatch to props. And it really can give you a headache really soon. Keep testing. And I didn't know any better because I worked on legacy Redux and I really didn't know another way to do it. But recently I started a project from scratch and I decided to open the Redux documentation and I discovered a lot of interesting things. And I want to share them with you because maybe you don't know them, or maybe you do know that there's a modern way to do Redux nowadays, but you don't know where to start on your legacy project. So yeah, let's get coding because I don't really have much time. So yeah, first of all, I will show you the project I prepared for you. This is basically a search page where I can look for some food. So I have, do you see it? Like, is it big enough? Great. So as I said, here I have a couple of stores, a French bakery and an Italian restaurant. And I can do some things. I can look for some spaghetti, for example. I can filter by category. Maybe I want some bread, but there's no bread here. There's only pizza and pasta. And I can sort the products by price. That's basically it. It's very straightforward. And here on the right, you can see my local app state. Of course, managed with Redux because we are in a React application with some TypeScript. We have Redux and we have a mock JSON server that basically returns some data. So yeah, this is my state. We have the selected catalog that I can change here. We have the search request, which contains the body of the search request to obtain my product. And it changes based on what I do. If I filter, if I search, if I sort by price. And then I have two more things, the catalogs, which are fetched, and they basically appear here, and the search part, which gives me my products. Okay, now that's cleared. Let's look at the code. And let's start focusing on Redux, clearly. So everything really starts here in the store file. Do you see the code? Is it big enough? Is it okay? Great. So yeah, in the store, basically the whole state tree of our app is born, and it is created through the create store method. And as you can see, it's already deprecated because it's legacy code. And it basically takes 3 parameters. The first one is the root reducer. You can see it here. And the root reducer contains one big reducer obtained by combining the reducers we have in our app. And the root reducer basically takes the current state and an action and returns you the next app state based on the action. Then we can pass some preloaded state here, which we left undefined because we don't need it. And then some store enhancers. Store enhancers basically help you enhance your store with additional functionalities. So here I have the DevTools extension for Redux, which we saw before when I showed you the Redux state. And we have the thunk middleware. A middleware stands between your actions and your reducers and basically lets you do some stuff before, like do some side effects or change them. And in this case, we need the thunk middleware because we need to perform async logic. So we have some actions that have to return some async functions instead of plain action objects. So yeah, that's why we need thunk. But why bother with all of this when we have configure store? Configure store is the modern way to do things. So let's change the create store to a more modern approach. So here I can use configure store which will be imported from Redux Toolkit. And to configure store, I can pass basically just the root reducer. I can do reducer equals to root reducer. And configure store already contains the DevTools and the thunk and everything that's basic enhancements for our store. So I can remove all this. I can remove the type for the DevTools extension. And then what I can do here is also export a function instead of the store directly. So I will do setup store, which is a function, which I might need, for example, for testing. I won't get into it because I don't have the time, but we can talk about it later. And so I have to change some types. Great, thank you, Copilot. So App Store is the return type of setup store. And then here I can change this to App Store Dispatch. Very good. Another thing I have to do here is remove all the useless imports I have. And then in the main file, in my main app file, I just have to import setup store instead of store because I don't have it anymore, and instance the store. Great, let's see if I broke everything. Let's refresh here. Seems to work. Let me look for some pasta. No, it's not working. Wait, oh yes, there's no pasta here. There's just spaghetti. It's more specific. Great. So first step, done. We moved from create store to configure store. And we don't have to enhance our store anymore manually. Everything is handled by configure store. Great, let's move on. Let's look at some components. Let's look at search, for example. Search is the component that renders my main search page with all its subcomponents. And we already start seeing some funny things. We have the props here, the type of our props, and 4 props. The props contain some parts of our state and some actions. And here you already see I had to write some verbose typing for my props, sorry. And these props represent some parts of the state I need to use in this component and some actions. How did I obtain those props? Let's move to the bottom. And we have the connect function, the infamous connect, which takes 2 arguments, the map state to props function and the map dispatch to props function. In the map state to props, I pass the state parts that I need in my component. And in the map dispatch to props, I pass my actions. And what I obtain with connect is a wrapper component for my search component. And since I really hate default exports, I did it like this. I exported it with the name export like this. So yeah, that kind of sucks. There's a lot of code we don't really need and potentially some props that we don't need. So let's move to Redux hooks. And first of all, let me remove all these ugly props. I don't want my component to have props at all. But then, and I also don't want to use connect, so I want to remove all this, and I surely don't want to use map state props and map dispatch props. So let's see how we fix things now. And let's introduce useSelector. useSelector is a cool hook that you can use to select the parts of the state that you need. So first of all, I need the search state in this component. And I can do it by importing useSelector from React Redux again, and I can pass it the state, which is typed as the root state of my application, which we defined before. And it gives me the search part of the state. And then, thank you, I need the other part of the state, the current search request. That is basically the same thing. So I really can use the same hook to do this. Sorry. Yes. Great. So this part is fixed. So here I use 2 hooks to obtain the parts of the state that I need in this component. Then I need to change my actions because I have to dispatch them. With map dispatch to props, it was already done automatically. So let's use another cool hook, which is useDispatch. And I have to define dispatch, the dispatch function. Using useDispatch from React Redux. And how do we use this? We have to dispatch our actions. So let's dispatch this one and remove this dependency because it's not a prop anymore. And then I want to also dispatch the search products action. Now we will get an error because I didn't type dispatch. So another type we need here is the app dispatch that we defined earlier in our store. The last thing I need to do is to export my search component. Yeah, I think it looks so much better, no props. And let's see, first of all, if it still works. Let's look for some bread, or maybe, yeah, here. Perfect. I can filter here. Everything seems to be working. Great. And what we did here was the second step of the migration. We went from connect, which is really, really verbose and forces us to define a lot of props for nothing, to Redux hooks, which are great. They're very straightforward. For each part of the state, you use the useSelector hook, and for each action, you need to dispatch it. And the only two types you ever need are root state and the app dispatch type. Let's move on to the third part. We want to get rid of our infamous actions and reducers. Let's see some example. We have our selected catalog here, which is basically the action that allows me to change the catalog when I click here. And we have to define the action type. We have to define the TypeScript type for the action. And we have to define the action creator. That basically gives me the string. That's the ID for my new selected catalog. And then we have the reducer. The reducer here just takes the string that represents the catalog ID and sets the new state. That's a lot of code to do all of this. So let's adopt a different approach. Let's use slices. And I prepared here my selected catalog slice we can use. So I put it here in the slices folder. Great. And let's see how it works. Basically, create slice lets you define a name for your slice, an initial state, and the reducers. So we define the set selected catalog here, which takes the action payload. The cool thing about slices is that once you created your slice via create slice, you can get your actions here and your reducer all in one file, all in one place. That's great. Now we have to change our imports. So first of all, in the store, for the selected catalog reducer, I have to import it from the slices. Great, that's simple. Then what I have to do in the components that use the actions that we created before, again, I import the slice. I import the action from the slice, sorry. Great. Now what? Now I want to show you something. We have another reducer that's done the old way, which uses the selected catalog action that we had before. Because when we change the catalog, we want the search request body to be reset. We want to start our search from scratch, okay? So basically here, when the set selected catalog action was called, we reset the state for our search request body. And here I want to show you that you can keep your old way of doing the search request if you're not ready to migrate it. Let's see how to do that. So here I was importing my set selected catalog action from the old file. And what I can do is import the set selected catalog from the slices. And then here, to type the action, I just can say type off set selected catalog, and that's it. And the case here is just set selected catalog point type. So yeah, we mixed the two approaches, and this means we can do our migration step by step because we don't have to migrate everything to make it work. So yeah, we did it. Let's see if I missed something because this is possible. I think it's still working pretty well. So yeah, what we did here, and I can clearly remove the reducers and the actions that I don't need anymore. So I remove this. And I remove also the selected catalog action. Great. Okay, we did our third step of our migration. Let me resume. Before we had our actions and our reducers for the selected catalog. This case was only one action, but imagine you have bigger files than me, and you had to define the types for each action manually. It was really verbose. And now we only have one file which contains the selected catalog slice. And here we define our actions and reducers automatically in one place. And we don't get any TypeScript headaches. Okay, let's move on to the final part of the migration. And I want to talk about data fetching. Data fetching here is done this way. Let's take, for example, the catalogs action. Here we have an action that, as I said before, uses thunk to perform some async logic. And here, basically, we have an action that fetches the two catalogs that we have here. And we have to dispatch several actions to do the fetching and to manually handle all the fetching states. So we will have a fetch catalog started action. Then we will have the succeeded if there's a success in the API call. And then we have the failed in case of error. And of course, we are using Axios or whatever HTTP client you like to do the fetching. So everything is really done manually. And look at this. We have the various action types. We have to type them all. And this is just one endpoint for getting our catalogs. This is extremely verbose. And in the reducer, we have to import everything. We have to set the initial state considering the status and of course the catalogs and the error. And then in the reducer, we have to handle all the cases, the started, the succeeded, and the failed case. This is really, really tiring just to look at. So let's introduce RTK query. RTK query is a tool that allows you to do some data fetching and some caching and some cool things and invalidation of the cache and so on. And it's directly integrated with Redux toolkit. This means that it's the recommended approach to handle data fetching if your apps already use Redux. And I prepared for this part a setup for our RTK query. Let's start with the API file. And I will put it here. It's similar to a slice. This is called the API slice. You can give it a name, which is by default, it's API. And then you can define the base query. The base query is essentially takes a function that's fetch base query by default. You can write your own. And fetch base query is a light wrapper around fetch to which you provide the base URL for starters for your endpoints. And then you can provide your endpoints. Now this is empty and we will see why in a minute. To make it work, I need to change the store because here for starters, I don't need the catalogs reducer anymore. And I will replace it by importing API point reducer path is assigned to API point reducer. This makes our RTK query setup work for all the endpoints we're going to add. And the other thing I have to do here is to add this to my configure store. I have to add the middleware for RTK query to work, which is equal to get default middleware and then get default middleware. Sorry, I imported something. Default middleware point concat the API middleware. This is just the basic setup you have to do in your store file to make RTK query work. So we added the reducer path here and the middleware, and that's all it takes. Okay, now I didn't define any endpoints here because I want to define them in separate files because my project is going to grow and I don't want to get this file to a 100 or a 1,000 lines even. So I want to create a separate endpoints folder to handle the endpoints. I already prepared it so I can put the catalogs endpoint here. And this code I could have written directly in the API file. So basically, I can inject the endpoints I don't write directly in the API file here. And I can define the number of endpoints that are needed here. And here I'm defining the get catalogs endpoints. That basically is a query that accepts nothing as a parameter and returns some catalog names. And the query calls the base path plus / catalogs. And I'm making sure I don't override other injected endpoints from elsewhere. The cool thing is that we get automatically a hook that's generated starting from the name of the endpoint. We get this use get catalogs query endpoint, which we can use in our components directly. Okay. So that's about it. Let's see how it works in our component that used our previously ugly catalogs endpoint. And here we see a bunch of stuff. Here we select the catalogs from the state, but we also have to select the errors and the status, the loading status. I mean, the status, which can be various things, but we need the loading. And then we have to use a use effect to dispatch our fetch catalogs action to actually fetch our data. What I want to do here is just remove this and remove all the manual handling of fetching states. Okay, and instead I want to use my RTK query hook. So what I do here is do const, and then I import my use get catalogs query hook, which gets no parameters, no need. And then I can do data, data, which I call catalogs, is fetching, not is loading, because is fetching will be fired even if you already have some cached data. Is loading won't. And the error. And we also get a bonus util, which is the refetch function, in case you want to recall your query manually. So in the blink of an eye, I get everything I need automatically. And yes, and these were the same names I used before, of course. What I can change here is in the drop-down placeholder, in case the fetching goes wrong here, I can put a button that allows me to retry the fetching. And here I can simply pass the refetch catalogs function. And yeah, I have to pass it as a dependency here. Great. And we don't need dispatch anymore. And we don't need all these imports anymore. Great. Let's see if I broke something. Seems not. Okay, I can still filter. I can still change my catalog. That's really good. And yeah, I can remove, of course, my catalogs action. Yes. And my catalogs reducer that I had before. Yes. Okay. Okay, we reached the end, so let's recap what we did. So we went from manual fetching with manually written action types and their TypeScript types, really verbose, and we had to rely on Axios to make it work. And we had to handle everything in our reducer. So all states, all fetching states, everything handled in our reducer. To simple RTK query. We have just to define the API file, the API slice, and then add our endpoints to that. And every time we create an endpoint, we get a hook. And I didn't even get into mutations. This is simple getting stuff, fetching data. And we can use our hook in our component. Plain and simple. And we get automatic handling of API fetch of data fetching states and some caching. We didn't have the time to look into that, but I hope you get the idea. So we removed 200 something lines of code. That's really not true because we didn't do the full migration. Again, we just migrated some parts. We migrated some actions and reducers, but we still have some old-fashioned actions and reducers and some old-fashioned data fetching. So here I did the full migration and I removed 200 lines of code. What we did here actually removes 120 something lines of code. But still pretty good, no? We removed some boilerplate that we hate so much. So I just want to conclude. I don't know if I convinced you. Maybe I went too fast. Maybe you didn't like what you saw. But I hope you can see that Redux can be more developer friendly. And I want to emphasize the importance of following the modern practices and the recommended practices in our projects. And this is fundamental for our developer experience, to have a good time developing the things we develop. And change does not really happen overnight. You can do it as I created this one slice at a time. But really, it's true. If you don't feel confident in migrating your old Redux setup, you can maybe start introducing the new parents on new functionality that you want to add to your project if you don't feel confident touching anything. Great, I think I said everything. Here are some useful links if you want to check out a bit more in detail RTK query, RTK, the new ways of using Redux. And yeah, if you have any questions, I think I'll catch you at the coffee break because we have no time. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. So if you have any questions, just come. I don't know if we have the time. Quick one, maybe? Yes, let's go. Just a quick one. Thank you so much.
Thank you for a presentation, quite interesting, I would say. A question, how would you assure that your migration was error-free after this, refactoring the code?
Yeah, you probably should set up the testing part, I think. I don't know if it was a trick question, but testing is important and I didn't get into it, but with this Redux setup, with the setup function that I created earlier, you can really create a preloaded store for your tests, and the testing gets simpler. So you don't really have to test the Redux inner methods. You just have the preloaded state you need for your tests, and then you can set up a good solid testing environment. I don't know. Some testing files in any case for your Redux setup, and maybe try to see if they don't break. That's my answer. Thank you. Okay. See you at the coffee break if you want, and if not, thank you again for joining me.